Greetings, fellow adventurers, and welcome to the Couple of Nerds podcast. I'm DnDWife, the creator of DnDWifeStories.com, and your co-host. Joining me is the man behind the screen, my brilliant dungeon master, and also my husband, Eguile. Say hi, Eguile.
Hey everyone, excited to be here sharing our nerdy adventures with all of you.
Absolutely. So what's Couple of Nerds all about? Well, we're diving into the realms of Extraeus, sharing our experiences, playing D&D in our apartment, and exploring the intricate tapestry of relationships both in and out of the game.
And we got some exciting segments for you all, from lore deep dives to crafting tips, artwork showcases, and relationship advice on and off the table. We've got a little bit of everything for every kind of adventurer.
So whether you're a seasoned adventurer or a tabletop newbie, we invite you to join us today. Tune in, relax, and enjoy the magic of Couple of Nerds. May your rolls be natural 20s and your adventures be legendary. Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Couple of Nerds. I'm your host, DnDWife, and with me is my co-host and husband, Dungeon Master Eguile.
How's it going, everyone?
Welcome. So today's episode is a Just Us segment where we just talk about our hobbies as a nerdy couple and the fun things that we like to do, essentially. So that's pretty much the gist of it. It's fun. So what's today's topic?
Yeah, well, I figured with some of the recent stuff and some of the new kind of ideas, as well as some of the new projects down the road, we would look at one of my favorite series, which is the Gundam series.
Yeah, I've heard you gush over it so much.
Yeah, I mean,
it's one of your favorites.
I first, I think, dove into it with like Toonami with Gundam Wing, and that was kind of my beginning for it. And then it just kind of got deeper and deeper as I got older and had more access to money, which definitely changes how you're able to do different hobbies.
Absolutely, it's interesting, but it's nice to see that sometimes we can have hobbies with our partners that aren't necessarily completely involving both.
Yeah, I think it was one of those ones where it was kind of a hard sell at the beginning because like big giant mecha robots and all that kind of stuff wasn't necessarily your what you wanted to introduce yourself into anime.
Yeah, I'd watched like Inuyasha, so it wasn't something I was used to, like the war animes.
Yeah, I mean that's the nice thing about it is that there are so many different kind of variants and different ways that you can kind of digest Gundam, which we'll go into more as we get into it.
But I'm super excited to cover all of these. But tell me a little bit more about your experience with the Gundam series in general.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, like I was saying, is like it really came down to, in my younger years and being stuck to cable television and programming hours, it was like Toonami. And so that was where, Gundam Wing originally came out. And obviously this is in the 90s. So it wasn't until later that I realized and learned that, Gundam didn't start at Gundam Wing, but started way back in like the 70s and like 1979. With the original Gundam, and then I end up watching that series, and it's weird to look at it now because like now it's like considered to be like very retro, it's very old school, but like when I was watching it, it was still fairly newish. It was just a little more dated, but really it wasn't. It was then that I kind of started, discovering more and more and more depth into this series. Because it wasn't just necessarily about, war or giant robots. I mean, there's such a plethora of different like genres that they play into, everything from your standard action, your drama, your love interest, your political intrigue, some little genetic splicing and special powers and stuff like that. But it even goes so far as into like comedy, children's shows.
That's interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and so it's kind of one of those things where it's like it's such a strange where everyone kind of goes, oh yeah, it's about giant robots. It's like, yeah, that's like the cool part of it.
It's kind of like what Transformers was for us here.
Right, but came before, way before Transformers.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it was more of like, there's so much more to it. It's just everything kind of uses the cool veil of giant robots to kind of tell the story.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it's been a lot of different shows, but it was always kind of based around, accessibility. I'm not trying to date myself or anything, but, when I first started getting into anime, DVDs had just started coming out.
Yep.
So, it was still a relatively new technology. So, I mean, to buy, I think I actually bought the Gundam Seed box set.
Wow.
And I'm pretty sure it was, to get everything, it's like $350.
Which back in the day was a fortune.
Oh man, yeah, because you would have to import it or if you'd have to buy it, so it was limited press.
Yeah.
And then it had to be like 6 DVDs because they could only hold so many episodes. So then it also came in like these huge bundles. But really that in my my day to get stuff like that was like really the only way you could besides watching it on like syndication.
Yeah. Oof.
I mean, I know for you, and we always joke about it, is like, you watch some anime and stuff, but you really, when we met, had like no idea that this like even existed.
Not really. Like I said, I'd had very limited experiences, like Yasha, the basic like at night, late,
right?
Like Adult Swim sort of things that were available, and that was really the only one I ever saw.
I love how yours is like Adult Swim.
Yeah,
mine is like Toonami, and that kind of also shows I think the differences of the anime too.
Yeah,
like the stuff that you kind of more experience versus the things that I experienced. But I mean, for me, like we were kind of joking when I was like, "Hey, let's do an anime or an episode about Gundam."
Yeah,
and at first you were like, "Oh, well, I mean, we talk about a few of them, but I mean, how deep can it be?" And then I was like, "Oh, hold on a second,
right. There's a bunch of them,
and it's not just all variations of the same like war is hell.
They all have different, unique stories.
I showed you ones like SD Gundam, where they're literally like little chibi robots of the giant robots.
You just showed this to me like 15 minutes ago. It was crazy.
And the robots talk and they get into goofy trouble, and there's like some kid that helps them out. Like, so these robots are literally firing machine guns, and this kid is like jumping around.
I'll
like,
help.
And so and using beam sabers, and it's all comical, and it's a kid. It's kind of a kid show.
Yeah.
I mean, I remember watching it growing up. And then you have ones that are very unique. Like for you, G Gundam, which is one of the few that you've watched all the way through with me.
Yep.
It's one of those things where it's one of my favorites, though for a lot of people, it's the one that they hate the most.
Oh, that's interesting to hear.
It's because it's the one really without guns per se. It's more about fighting, like real fighting, instead of it being like, flying in space, shooting laser guns at each other and like trying to target. It's more of like, using martial arts moves with a robot, which, you watched.
Gotcha.
But it also is one of those unique ones where it's not very long.
True, because I've seen some of the clips that you've shown me of some of the other Gundam series that you've seen, and a lot of it is sort of these like epic space fights, or military installations, and it's all grand and different.
And there's like, and that's what I really love, but like there's a lot of like story driven ones, which is like the 8th MS team, which is showing you more of kind of like the grunt side of the combat, and that, what about the people that don't get to play in the giant fancy prototype nuclear powered mech, and they're just in a standard issue
basic grunt. Essentially the basic uniform of mechs.
And so it's one of those things where it's like it's kind of interesting that you get kind of those dynamics, but then like my personal favorite, which is the Gundam Seed series. And that one, I know, kind of also takes a lot of hits because it's very melodramatic and it's very emotional, and it gets kind of, a little silly at times. But the bigger one with me on that one also is that it kind of introduced me to J-pop because of all the intro songs. And I remember getting into Gact, which was a band that made a lot of the intro songs for the Gundam series. And by listening to that, I remember buying the album. First I bought the soundtrack to the anime. And then once I got that, I was able, because obviously, dating myself again, Wikipedia didn't exist when this was happening, so finding out information was not easy on the internet. There wasn't Google that I could just Google something. So like, I got the soundtrack, I found out who actually made the song, then I think I went to like an FYE and was able to special order the specific disc so that I could listen to it and it was like not in English, so the whole album wasn't in English, so I couldn't read into the album art. But obviously I was listening to the music. I didn't really care about reading the album art. I think I still have that album somewhere, but who knows where it is.
That's crazy.
But
that's
it's
history
so it's one of those cool things because it created such a depth for me back in the day where fandom was hard to have because you couldn't just go online and find someone who also liked the show you liked, and then you're streaming it and you can have a watch party and all. You were kind of relegated to what you could find, and hopefully someone else out there did that. And again, it was all expensive, so it was like what you kind of hoped like everyone bought different series so then you can like trade off to hopefully save yourself some money.
It's different, right? Because like here, if you like a show that is made here in the US, it's very easy to get all the merch, everything you want, no problem. But back in the day, it was even harder to get things from overseas. Nowadays we have all these like shipment companies and everything that do this for a living. Make it super easy for us now.
There's that, and then like obviously streaming shows like Crunchyroll, the defunct Funimation, all that is such commonplace now, and it's so kind of cool to see how it has gone, but it's also, man, made it seem like the way it was to be a fan back in the day was it was a whole different story.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now it's just you kind of scroll, you see which ones you like, you give it a couple of episodes. It's like if you like something, you're putting in a couple $100 investment if you want to watch it, not just $5.99 a month.
Right. It was definitely a bigger commitment back in the day.
Yeah, and it is that thing where it is different for person to person. Like I know obviously you've had a hard time connecting to certain ones, and we've watched other ones, some of the more recent ones we've watched. I know that Entlink has recommended the Witch of Mercury. I think
I need to watch that.
That might be a cool one. We haven't seen it. We'll have to give an update because that is kind of one I've been interested to see.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
But really, I know I've tried a few, but for you, I mean, I think really your main influences are just my influences.
A little bit. Well, at least when it comes to the Gundam series, for sure. So I really just watched the G Gundam series all the way through. It's the only one I've actually seen from start to end.
Burning shining finger, man. It's the greatest move ever.
I just really liked it. I think it's the the sort of boon I get that I didn't watch the other series, so I don't have this sort of bias against G Gundam.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right, like it's not picked apart already.
So I was able to enjoy the story, and I really liked it. They were all fighting for something, and in the end, it was really like, oh wait, we have to come together to fight this like evil that's going to tear us all apart.
Yeah, I love because like spoiler alerts, but this show came out like 25 years ago, so I don't think that's too much of a spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But it's always funny where like the main bad guy was like a robot that was designed to like terraform the Earth back to being good.
It was supposed
and then it was bad
to be good,
because it basically was like, okay, if I want to make this better, all humans need to go. And it's like, oh crap, it got to that idea.
Yep.
Oh no. But and obviously, which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk about this, is that's so cool because they are announced that there is going to be more G Gundam coming soon.
Oh, that's dope. I'm excited.
Which I am super stoked on because I think that's going to be cool to see in this new era and maybe give it a little more kind of clout that it needs.
Because honestly, I loved seeing all the different Gundam that are all like uniquely based off of their countries.
Right.
All of
the little like Dutch one that's like a windmill,
or the French one that's all roses. It's like a knight.
It's like a matador kind of thing. Yeah, like there's all kinds of cool ones. Right.
They're amazing.
I think that's also kind of that aspect too, because it's not like in most series where you're watching like one special one that just destroys hundreds of others.
Yeah. This is one where they all have their unique strengths and weaknesses, and we're really watching a fight go down, and a lot of them are fighting for some really important things. So it's really nice to see that motivation.
Right. Yeah, and plus, I just have like a special heart for like 90s anime.
Yeah.
To me, it was just the golden era where the art was all hand-drawn. You could really see kind of the heart and soul.
Yeah, it's a little dramatic, but it's in a good way, I think,
And the music, like classic music, I don't know what it is about it, but like it just brings the more drama to it, which I've always enjoyed.
Yeah, they have some really good soundtracks behind these.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're trying to find more anime that you like. We recently went to try to watch Gundam Seed, but unfortunately, with the streaming version, I didn't realize they had redone the voices.
Yeah, that was a unique, interesting thing to run into.
That was tough for me because for me, I have such a heart for the original voice cast that to hear anything different
was impossible.
I just don't know if I can take it. So I'm going to have to dig out ancient relics that are DVDs.
But you have those.
I have them. They're somewhere in here with my expansive DVD
so we'll
anime
dust
collection.
Those off and play them.
One of these days we'll have to like put out all my DVDs and take a picture of it just to show kind of the collection I have.
Yeah.
But for me, you know, it's kind of obviously a different story because I am swimming in Gundam stuff and kind of the, you know, I grew up with it since I was a kid. I used to have the models, the non-build models, like that were action figures.
Yeah.
And then I also had the models themselves that I would build in my spare time.
Can we safely say Gundam is like your favorite anime series?
That's tough. That's it's definitely within my top 3. Definitely in my top 3. But like, I don't know. That's
probably changes with the mood.
No, I mean, I have my basics. I don't reveal everything, but it's definitely within my top 3.
Gotcha.
Because it is something that I've consumed so much of, but I mean, in terms of fandom compared to how much you can get of it, that's a little different.
Yeah.
But for me, you know, because also like it's so expansive because it's not just television shows. Like you, obviously, you're now coming into the gaming world, which I've loved so much. But in reality, you don't know that there's so many Gundam games, and I've played almost all of them.
Yeah, I haven't.
There's Gundam Fighter. Whoa. There's Dynasty Warriors Gundam, which is you don't know, as a hack and slash, where you play you basically play and kill hundreds of thousands of robots.
Oh my!
Oh yeah,
that's fun.
And it's just mine.
I think you've shown me clips of that. It's awesome.
I'm pretty sure when we were dating, I was playing it.
Yeah, that was fun.
I mean, so I played video games. I've watched a lot of the series. I haven't seen them all, but I have seen all of the originals. So the original Gundam, I made sure to go watch the original story with Amuro Ray and fighting Char. The Principality of Zeon. Just making sure to get that cred out. So that I know what I'm talking about.
Gotta put the nerd cred out.
I really wanted to watch some of those ones because I felt like that was a lot of the like origins, and you really kind of want to see the roots.
It's
kind of like when we went and saw Dragon Ball.
Yeah,
because I had never really watched it.
The foundation of the
and
anime.
it really kind of gave me, I think, a much more respect for Dragon Ball Z and Super because because we watched Dragon Ball. But for me, it was like there was so much impact because I also really got into the models. I mean, I even remember from where I am, I was able to travel to, now this was back in the day, like in San Francisco before it's become whatever it's become now, different subject. There used to be a Banco store in a thing called, I can't even remember what it's called because it's been so long. Essentially, they had this mini mall that was dedicated by the Metreon. Oh, okay. It was made by Sony, and it was supposed to be this huge shopping center where you could like go to an
Sony
IMAX,
all day.
But they had a Banco store, and you could go there and actually buy the model kits in person. Now, like, you only could import them. So this was like the first time in, like, at least in my region where I would be close enough. So we took a day, traveled, and got to actually like purchase the miniatures. So I remember buying like 6 or 7 at that time. Probably dropping like $400 or $500 like it was nothing to get that. I mean, unfortunately, that store no longer exists now. But it was that treat when it finally started becoming more popular here in the States to have more access to things. I find that funny because now you and I, when we go to conventions, we run around and we kind of see various ones. And I know you're always like, you should get that one. You should get that. And like, to me, it's like, I don't know if my fingers can take that because, man, we've spent a many a night finishing up some of the models where you've come and helped me finish because, I'm working on the left hand and it's like, I got to do the same thing on the right hand. Honey, can you help me? And we'll just mirror each other. Just do what I do.
Yeah. It's been fun.
It's fun, right? And it's like, for you, we're playing, we're working together. You're helping me finish a project. Yeah, it's a big weird robot with a giant pointy sword.
Yeah.
But it's still us coming together.
Yeah, we're still having fun with it, We're trying our best to make sure it looks as good as possible. So that's always fun.
Yeah, and so, for me, like, when it comes to the, like, like the Gundam series as a whole, like it really comes down to like, Gundam Wing will always be a special place for me with, Hero Yui and all that, just because it was the first one I ever watched. And it was like the one where it was such a big deal with, Wing Zero and getting to see that. And then it was that same thing, like having that fandom be created, and then you see kind of that split that comes out when you start getting the different things, and you're like, wow, this is cool. I wish there was more. Holy cow, there's so much more.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big thing, like we talk about with our fandoms, is like, sometimes you don't want to get into something, or you're reluctant to watch something, and you're like, well, what if I really like it and there's not enough?
Right.
Man, with some of this stuff, there's so much more than just the anime that you can have. I mean, I don't think I've seen lately where there isn't like a really cool anime that doesn't have a video game, a cell phone game, something, a short story, other kinds of ways to enjoy that franchise.
Yeah, other aspects that kind of add to the whole experience.
Right, just more nerdy hobbies. And I think like a big one into me that I've kind of been doing for quite a while, but I even think it shows kind of the stages you can have in your fandom is like, I build the models.
Yep. You do. You have for a long time.
And I have for a long time. Unfortunately, I've lost more than I've built because, I've moved a lot, and it's hard to keep a lot of those things. And they're fragile as all heck. Yeah. But for me, it was always a fun thing to kind of have, and it was kind of like you got to see kind of the inner workings of the robot, and it was always kind of this kind of skill level that you start out at. So for me, when I first started, and obviously this is before we met, it was very rough. I remember using like fingernail clippers, and I put them together, and I would just kind of get them together.
Yeah, you do whatever you can.
I just kind of put them together, snap them out, make it.
And I remember you would get like the more basic ones, because obviously when you're a kid, you don't necessarily have all the money to throw at Gundam models.
It would be the one, I think of the 1/166th scale. So it'd be detailed, but it wouldn't be very detailed.
Yeah.
And so, after a while, but then as I did more and I grew up, I started getting more intricate. Now, at this point in my kind of life, I have a whole kit where I have various razors and X-Acto knives so that I can trim and shave and sanding. And I've gotten to that stage. The next step I've been hoping to get into is the more of like the stickers. I recently got like the outlining pins specifically from the Gundam model company. So I can't read the labels, but they're supposed to be able to accent and create kind of more depth.
Cool. Yeah.
So I'm hoping to take the models that I do have, which
and add that.
Which if you take a look on our YouTube, you can see them on our wall in our home. That's actually what is in our home.
That's the display,
which is what makes it really kind of cool. But really for me, it is kind of you got to kind of look at the different scales, right?
Yeah.
Because there are standard grade, master grade, perfect grade.
Gotcha.
And so like your standard grade is like anybody can do. You can give that to your 10-year-old. You can let them try it out. Obviously, mind you, small pieces.
Yeah.
Be aware. But it isn't as difficult. Now, then you get to master grade, and these get to be more kind of complex, and they take a little bit of time. Most of those you can get done in probably in like half a day's worth of work, couple of hours.
Yeah.
Standard grade, you can probably get it done in an hour.
Gotcha.
It's not very detailed. Perfect grade, on the other hand, which I have recently, thanks to you and you giving me the gift of one, getting to experience what it means to build a perfect grade. And that took me, obviously not because of not doing it, but like over a year to finish because of just how complex these things are. How
intricate it was. I mean, I watched you sit there and take the little pieces, pick them off, shave them all down, start to put them all together, and then do it all over again.
Oh, yeah. And it, don't get me wrong, if you really are looking for a complex puzzle or a model, the perfect grades are amazing.
Yeah, they can be really calming.
And not all perfect grades are the same, mind you. You can get a pretty standard perfect grade. It might not be the main character model, but you can find a lot that are still very fun, a little less pricey, but still that complexity that you can get. But if you have the resources, some of those perfect grades have like internal lighting systems. There's the Gundam
wiring,
yeah. There's the Gundam Unicorn, which has animatronics that allow it to change form, and the robot changes at the push of a button.
Yeah, that's crazy. Cool.
So there's a lot of details that can come from these different Gundams, and you can kind of pick the class you want and kind of how much you want to dip both your toe and your wallet.
Yeah, because I mean, I've helped you with like a little bit of it, some of the more detail stuff that are more delicate, just because I have smaller fingers.
Yeah.
But I've done some of the stickering. It's really nice. The thing I find too that I find awesome about some of the kits is that they come with all these extra parts, and there's a lot of them in there.
Yeah, and that was the thing I had to tell you, where like they're extra because they're like, the way they make them is sometimes they'll press things that aren't always for the same one.
Yeah.
So you can't just be like, oh, let me clip them all out and we'll have all. It's like, no, there's extra. You have to ignore those.
I remember thinking you had missed like something. I was like,
yeah.
no, you forgot this.
Oh, I know, you're so worried. But it's like, no, that's just kind of the methodology they have when it comes to that.
I think
and
it's super cool.
Over the years, I find that like if you're like me and you have like kind of like skin issues and like that, you really want to get some like thumb guards.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of sharp, pointy edges that get
hurt.
made when you're cutting it out.
Oh, yeah.
Invest in a good pair of pliers.
Yep, they're helpful.
Or like snips, something that can get a really nice close cut.
An edge,
off
a
of
nice
the edges.
edge, yeah.
And then a very, very sharp X-Acto knife. Now, obviously, this is where the kids part comes out, and you don't want kids using that.
Yeah.
But for more advanced adult users, using a very sharp X-Acto knife resting against the edge, you can create a very seamless kind of slide and cut off whatever little edges or debris. And then a trick I've shown you is sometimes when you make a cut, kind of it'll create like this white residue, and it looks like it's different.
Yeah.
But if you just take your fingernail and you just kind of scrape it across, that white residue will just be removed, and it's just kind of plastic residue.
Yeah.
And so it'll kind of come back to its own luster.
It's like a coating almost.
Right. So if you just kind of use your fingernail and go across where you cut into, it will return back to the color of the piece. It won't have this kind of off-white look. And because I've shown you a few times where you thought you might have messed up, and it's like, no, just use your fingernail, scrape it off.
It'll be fine.
And I have you help me in quite a few because of the nature of it's got a left and it's got a right.
Yeah.
And so sometimes, what can be frustrating is that you build all this and then go, okay, now I got to do it all over again.
Yep.
So what's cool that it is something that you can sit down and I mean, I know you've helped me a few times.
Yeah,
I mean, what do you feel?
nice.
I mean, has it been something you would like maybe doing on a full build?
I find the repetitive nature sometimes a little bit calming, just because it's a focused task, for someone who's so detail oriented. I think that's a good one for me. I just like organizational type hobbies.
The biggest thing is like I'm really looking forward to getting your help with like the decals and the stickers.
Yeah, because those are interesting. I'm also interested in doing the war sort of effect paints.
Yeah, because that's also why we have the airbrush.
Yeah,
which was to start now adding weathering effects and all those cool little things.
Yep.
Because for us, us as a couple of nerds, we like to show off.
Yeah.
And so we don't hide our nerdiness here. And being in an apartment, you also have to find nice ways to put up stuff that doesn't look where it's like either you're kind of shoving your
stuff
nerdy
around
into everyone's face, and it's like, here's what I like in your face. Where you can kind of go a little overboard, but also be a little aesthetically pleasing.
And it's what we call nerdy chic,
right? And I had looked over the internet and I had found someone who had done this. I so long ago I don't remember, but by using the boxes of the model itself and using them as kind of like a framing and then putting the Gundam on top of.
It looks really nice.
It creates this really cool
It looks super clean. I love it.
So you can have your Gundams in these poses, and you can have them on your wall up high, so nobody can hit them. And they, obviously got to dust them every now and then.
Yeah, make sure they're clean.
But they can be out, they can be seen, and they're not just all crowded in a box or in a closet or maybe in a cabinet. They can be kind of very much shown out. And if you're interested to see what this looks like, come on over to our YouTube page, Couple of Nerds Productions. And you can see a short that you made that shows kind of the design that we have in our living room that kind of shows off some of the models that I've made over the years.
Yeah, and so we can show you guys what they look like. And then if you have any sort of models that you've made, any Gundams that you love, you can share all of those photos on our Couple of Nerds Discord community.
Oh, yeah. And on our YouTube, we are showing a lot of what you just called like our nerdy chic and how we kind of integrate our nerdy fandoms. And as we've talked before, we do have that personal fandom with Dragon Ball Z.
Yep.
And so you can also see
that was a
where we have
video,
our Dragon Ball Z altar that we have out that really kind of is cool. And keep an eye out because we're going to also include some tutorials on how you can build these same kind of designs in your apartment or your small space, whether it's your bedroom, your office, or like us, our living room.
Yeah.
So that way you can show off your nerdiness and be proud of what you did and be able to see your hobbies and your projects, in front, not hidden away.
A nice way to display the hobbies.
We've had to hide our nerdiness for so long.
No longer.
But we really want to thank everyone, obviously,
so much.
for listening to us again. Once again, telling a little bit about us and kind of sharing this one, telling a little bit more of my personal fandom.
This is a good close to the heart
we'll
one.
definitely have to talk more about yours coming up here pretty soon. So
yes.
We'll leave that as a secret for later with your favorite series.
Oh, yeah.
But hopefully you all can join us. Please, if you haven't already, please subscribe to our YouTube page. With every subscription, it shows us that we're doing the right thing and we're making a step in the right direction.
Yeah, we truly appreciate all the engagement we can get. Please like, subscribe, comment below. Let us know what you think. We really appreciate it if you can.
And if you have any models or any other types of ways that you display, whether it's cool lighting or base effects, please share it. Come on down to our Discord, to the Couple of Nerds Discord. Show it on the Just Us page. That way we can see, you can show everyone, and we can see other cool ways. Perhaps we will stake your style and put it somewhere in our apartment too.
Yep.
But we won't know unless you call or you come out and join us on our Discord.
If you don't have a link to the Discord, you can always comment below. We'll always feel free to include that for you as soon as you comment. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but thanks everyone, and hopefully hear from you soon.
Have a good night. And that concludes today's journey through the realm of Couple of Nerds. We hope you had a blast exploring the intricate world of Extraeus. Don't miss out on the visual extravaganza over at our YouTube page at Couple of Nerds Podcast. It's where the magic comes to life with exclusive video segments, art previews, and a peek behind the curtain.
Dive deeper into our adventures by visiting DnDWifeStories.com, your haven for all our podcast transcripts and a treasure trove of content dedicated to the captivating universe of Extraeus.
Your unwavering support is our greatest treasure. Take a moment to weave your thoughts into a review and hit that subscribe button for an enchanting journey with Couple of Nerds.
Join us beyond the podcast in the Extraeus Project Discord. Connect with us, the creators, and even the travelers themselves. Witness the magic unfold in live drawing streams, game alongside us, and step into our digital tavern, the Bard's Haven. Share your stories and characters with fellow adventurers. Visit DnDWifeStories.com for the link to join our vibrant community.
Stay tuned for more tales, more laughs, and more insight into the world of tabletop gaming. Until then, may your dice be kind, your campaigns epic, and your adventures legendary.